Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Today I've got a new tutorial for the producers and beat makers out there. Specifically, I want to talk about how to bring your drums to life, how to make them more intricate, some tricks and techniques that I used in this particular session. This is a beat that I'm finishing up. Some things that I use to really make the drums move along, make them more layered, and just have a lot more texture. So let me go ahead and I'm going to just play back a little bit of this beat so you can hear some of the elements, and then we'll dive in and talk about some of these techniques. All right, so that gives you an idea of the different drum elements, some of the transitions I use. And now I want to jump in and just talk about some of the methodologies, some of the just thoughts that went into trying to get this particular kind of drum sound, really layered, really thick, intricate drums going on there. And first, let's just talk about, traditionally in hip hop, we kind of have like a kick, snare, hi-hat pattern that in the past is just sort of looped for, 8 bars maybe, and just goes throughout the whole beat. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but definitely in my own production, as well as, a lot of production I'm hearing these days in more modern urban tracks, the drums are much more full, they're much more rich, there's a lot more going on, and you're also building them around a true arrangement. So you've got a lot of dynamics happening. You're going through verses and then you're dropping into, in this case, a hook that has different drums, which we'll talk about that kind of methodology here in a minute. But first, let me just solo the kick, the snare, and say the hat. So that's just kind of a traditional, trio that would be playing in a hip hop beat. So real basic, but they're very present when I play them back with all the other tracks. And the main reason for that is that they're layered. So this kick, for instance, that's not just one sample. I actually mix together, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 different kicks so that I get that presence and that impact. The same thing with the snare. Those are stacked up to give us a really lush sound. And the reason why I do this is, one, it'll punch through the mix a lot better once you kind of get a feel for how to mix your drums. And also just goes back to when I started mixing, I was looking up to people like Andy Wallace, who is a mix engineer, who he used to mix a lot of acoustic drums, and he would mix ambient samples behind his main samples, which is, kind of the same sort of thing that I'm doing in the urban production, except we're mixing, a couple of different samples, electronic samples, and then we may mix, some kind of an ambience or reverb behind there. So I just want to cover that and make sure that if you're not exploring and experimenting with layering your samples for your drums, definitely something that you want to start doing. And then let's go down here, and this is the other thing that I really like to do, is layer my drums with different loops and live elements. So I've got some stuff in here from my drum kit called the Niche Kit, just to layer it. I think these hi-hats, so those are from the Niche Kit as well. So once you start layering some of these loops behind your main elements, so then I believe I've got another percussion loop. So I've got that one, and what I tend to do with some of these percussion loops is send those through something like a bandpass filter, low pass filter, high pass filter. I may distort them and layer those back behind our kick and snare. Same thing with that. It sounds like I just sent it through a bandpass filter. So once you get all of those layered underneath, it just creates a much more interesting pattern. And you're going to be able to keep your listeners' interest a lot better with something like that. Just sounds much more exciting when you've got all these different elements that are building upon the rhythm, the main rhythm of the kick and snare. So let's keep moving on down here. And I have a live drum layer. And I really just wanted to, again, just make it sound more acoustic, more live. And so for that, I used the Easy Drummer. This is, I believe, the hip hop expansion pack. And what I did was I just filtered off all the lows because I really just wanted to catch some of the mids, some of the highs to create movement in the drums. So let's just hear that pattern. So just a nice organic layer that I put behind there. You'll also hear some very interesting like little bells and vinyl sounds that are created by this expansion in Easy Drummer, which is really cool. It just adds a nice texture. So let's play all of that stuff back in the context of the beat. And in the case, especially with this beat where we have this synth lead that is really steady, there's not a lot of like chord changes or anything going on. So the drums really dominate this beat and keep things moving. So moving on to the next tip that I have for you, and that is to create some fills that are going to create variation throughout your arrangement. So my idea for this one was to create kind of like a live break sort of feel. But just something that would keep the arrangement moving along, especially in the verses and as well as in the intro. That creates the drop, and then we've also got it coming out of the verse into the hook. So rather than sample, a live break or whatever, I just created one from scratch using Easy Drummer, and this is the Funkmaster expansion. This is a really cool kind of 70s vintage sort of sample pack that you can create these live breaks with. Let's see what I did on the processing side of it. I compressed it, and then I have some Camel Crusher on it, as well as some EQ. And these are all just things to kind of dirty it up, give it a little bit more of a crushed sort of vintage sound. But let me take that stuff off of it and we'll solo it just so you can hear the kit itself. And one thing to also notice is that I change the fill. So right there, it is a little bit different than when it goes. So we just got a little tom fill rather than on the snare. And all these little variations throughout your beat are going to make it just more evolving, more dynamic. I want to say I used a filter on the Camel Crush, excuse me, and just automated the cutoff. So it's a nice little fill there. So that's what I did for that break. Again, you can use that for some really cool types of vintage 70s drum fill sounds. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the variation in the hook. So a lot of times with urban production, the drum patterns will just stay the same, like we were talking about. No changes, no evolution really, and just going along with this idea of creating more intricate drums. I like to switch the drums completely for my hooks, my choruses coming out of verses. So if we play that back. we introduced this new layer, which is, again, I think it's that same Funkmaster pack, and it just has some automation happening on the filter once again. So then we introduce an 808. Some really great samples in the Easy Drummer packs. This is the Dream Pop one. That's where that 808 comes from. And then I have a percussion layer here. Clap. Different effects there. So that just creates a nice contrast, just a nice variation for our verse. So then when we go back into our verse, there's kind of this lift, and then, you know, those drums really hit hard and are impactful. So it's not wrong to completely switch up your drums, use a different drum kit. As long as it sounds and feels natural to you, then I would definitely encourage you to mess with some variations for drums in your hook. You can also see, again, that I've automated some things to create movement. So anyways, y'all, that's just a couple of the techniques I used in this particular session to liven up the drums, give them more variation, more excitement, make them more dynamic, and really just to enhance the arrangement. You know, just because we're in urban music doesn't mean that we can't have true arrangements that, you know, evolve and have hooks with, you know, different elements being introduced in the drums and elsewhere. You know, really just have freedom with this to layer your drums and have fun with it, and just make them more interesting, more exciting. There's no rules to this. Again, just try out these different techniques, and I feel really confident that this is going to make your beats a lot more exciting for your listeners, as well as people who are writing to your instrumentals. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. If you learned anything in this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.